everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my channel. Today I am embarking on a new project. I did announce this project a couple of weeks ago. It's this dress right here. If you haven't seen that video from a couple of weeks ago, I did a video examining this antique piece right here. So this dress is from about 1915-ish, and it is an antique piece in my collection, and I am going to recreate it for myself. Super excited, and that project begins today. So it's really hot today, so I don't think I'm going to be able to go into the sewing room, but that gives me the perfect opportunity to really examine this dress and how it would be patterned. So the first thing that I'm going to start with is the skirts. As I mentioned in that previous video, the skirts are actually straight panels. So it's going to be fairly easy to go ahead and take those straight panels and just size it up to my proportion. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, okay, how much width of the existing skirt is gathered into how much width of the existing waistband. Then I'm going to do an algebraic formula and translate that to, okay, how much width is needed for the waistband that I would have as opposed to her waist. And likewise, the same sort of thing of like, okay, well, this dress probably would have hit this lady at this length. What length do I need to have it hit me at that length for me? Whether that is, you know, high ankle, low mid calf, etc. Because we are talking about the mid 19-teens here, so hemlines are rising. So the skirt is going to be what I'm going to do first, just because that is easy, and as I mentioned, it is very hot outside and my brain isn't fully functioning. Then once I have the skirt all figured and also the little sections of the bias trim that are on the skirt, once I have all of that figured out, then I will start turning to the bodice. Now ideally, I would like to try to pattern this myself, because a few of you have asked me if I'm going to be able to release a pattern on this, and I would like that answer to be yes. That said, if I'm not able to figure out how to pattern this myself, there is a pattern from Wearing History that has kind of that similar cross front that this one does, so I feel like if I can't figure it out myself, I'm going to go ahead and purchase the Wearing History pattern and see if that will work for me, because then I would just have to add the collar. And hopefully the collar won't be too hard. I did kind of a similar shaped collar on my 1912-ish Butterick dress from last year, so I will link that video down below as well. But I'm pretty sure I still have the pattern for that, so I'm hoping that I can just use that pattern shape for this dress here. So anyway, all of that talking aside, let's go ahead and get into figuring out this pattern. So I've been working on the pattern for this dress, and I think that for the bodice, this Butterick pattern, Butterick 6093, which is actually what I used for the turquoise dress last year, I think that this is going to work just fine as the base, especially because I've already made some of the tweaks to it from last year that I think I will want again. Things like making one side just hit the center front while the other side crosses over, because that's the case here. The left side of the bodice just goes to the center front, and then the right side of the bodice crosses over to be on the other side. Kind of like what this looks like, except that it's not both sides doing it. This pattern is both sides, and I'm only doing one side. So I think that that's going to be good. I've already done some of the alterations to things like the arm size, where I've folded all these tabs back, so hopefully that will remain true. I've also written in some measurements about lengthening. I am going to need to lengthen this significantly more though, because the waistline is actually dropped. So I kind of drew it in right here. This is the raised waistline of what I did last time and what the pattern is, and this is kind of where it's dropping to. It's really dropping to the natural waist by the time we get to the mid to late teens, and then the skirt is wider on the hips. And the skirt I've just done math for, I'll show you that in a sec, but yeah, I'm kind of going to combine the two collars, because view A here has the curved collar in the back right there that I want. And then this is kind of similar to what my collar looks like in the front, except it's not this weird one-sided collar with a ruffle thing that makes zero sense. It will be a collar on both sides with no ruffle with a scalloped edge. So I'm kind of combining the collars. I think it's going to work to just kind of line up the notches right here, because those should be both hitting the same place on the shoulder. So I should be able to line up the notches and then just kind of shape them together to create the collar collar shape that I need. So that'll be super, super handy if that is actually true. And then I'm obviously going to make a mock-up of all of this. So I will be mocking up the bodice as soon as it's cool enough in here to actually be in here for more than 3 minutes at a time, because I'm already sweating and I don't even have the iron on. As far as the sleeves go, this pattern has a fitted sleeve, so I am hoping that I can just kind of use that. Though I do believe my sleeve seams are different, so I may have to actually change that quite a bit, because I don't think mine's a 2-piece. I think mine's a 1-piece if I remember correctly. So I'll have to study that a little bit more. And then as far as the skirt goes, this is my math right here. So basically what I've done is just scaling the original skirt to my size. So for example, because the original skirt doesn't go all the way to the hem, it has that sort of last little tier of bias scallop on there. I don't need it to be the full length, which would be 38.5. So I determined that it needs to be 3 inches shorter than that, plus then adding in enough because I'm going to actually hem it, not leave it raw. And then I need seam allowance. So mine's going to be 37 inches long for my base skirt cut length. And then this is the math for my skirt width. So the skirt width on the old one is 67 inches around, goes into a 27-inch waist. I'm going to make mine a 41-inch waist because I'm pretty sure that is what my corseted measurement in here is. It's larger than my natural waist. And that means that I need a 101.7-inch skirt width, which would be 3 panels to the full width of the fabric. And the last one I think is about 19 inches wide. So I'm not exactly sure how to do that if I want it to be asymmetric like they did in here, where they had that sort of 7-inch panel just kind of hanging out. I could put a 19-inch panel in. So that's a possibility, or I might just kind of divide it up and decide where I want my seams. And then this, I'm not sure if I'm going to use this. This is math for the scallop depth. The original scallops are 4.5 inches. These are the bias bands of scallops on the skirt. The original ones are 4.5 inches plus the seam allowance. And doing the scaling based on my height, that would give me a 5.82 inch scallop band, and I'm not sure I want to do that. That seems too wide. So I'm gonna have to play with that, maybe cut out a little piece that is 5.82 wide, holds it up on the skirt, see how it lays out, and go from there. But otherwise, I'm probably gonna go somewhere in between those two measurements. But the nice thing is that's all of the information that I need for the skirt. So as soon as I can turn and iron on in this room, I can start the skirt. I'm going to cut it right into the actual fabric because it's a straight panel skirt. It's very easy. The bias bands may have to wait until later once I have cut out other pieces. So yeah, but at least I'll get the skirt fabric out of the way and into the skirt. So I have my skirt panels cut out and sewn together, but I was looking at the bodice closer and I decided I would go ahead and remove the Velcro. So I did remove the Velcro from the old antique one. There were the 2 sets of Velcro. I removed both of them. And this one I removed so that I could see what this looks like inside, which is this. And then this one I removed because if you remember from the antiques video, the bodice was like tucked inside the Velcro. And I was like, that's really weird. Let's get that untucked. But you know what? I'm starting to think that that tuck was actually original, not with the Velcro. Like, it was its own line of stitching. It wasn't the Velcro. The Velcro had its own stitching. And now that I have taken the tuck off, if I put this where the snaps are, which I am not right now, but if it's where the snaps are, it just doesn't really work. Like, it's too long. It's way too long. And I mean, I've got pins in here kind of holding it up. The other thing that I noticed though, was that there were originally gathering stitches right here. Do you see those stitches right there? Those are gathering stitches. They continue from over here. However, they're not being used to pull up the bodice. So what I've done is I've actually run a gathering thread through just right along kind of the waistline to try to kind of pull that up, because I think that this was being pulled way farther over than it was supposed to, because this bit, and I noticed this in the examining video too, that it was kind of twisting as it was over here. And this bit, there is a similar flap on the other side right here that is just like decoration. It's a 2-inch deep flap. If I put this right here, it is 2 inches deep. If I put this where the Velcro was, it's way over here. Like, it's so crazy. And that's why it was twisting the skirt over here and putting too much bulk right in here. So I think what's happening is that these gathering stitches are necessary. However, they may have, in fact, made the bodice too long right in here. The interesting thing is that my turquoisey teens bodice from last year had a very similar problem that I did not fix, and it's just like a little bit baggy on one side kind of over here. And I think that the same thing happened here, and they decided afterwards, oh, okay, well, we'll just do this and hope that no one notices, and we'll just stitch that, top stitch it. You know, no one's gonna notice that except for 106 years later when someone is now picking apart this outfit and examining every little corner of it. So yeah, I have a feeling this was just too long and I probably shouldn't have taken that tuck out, but at least now I can see what's going on in there. What is going on in there is that there is binding up here at the top right here, and I believe this is original. And so this was gathered just slightly into the binding. The top of the bodice was gathered a little bit more, and that binding goes to pretty much where the center is, which is like right here. So all of that said, all that I've done so far is, as I mentioned, I seamed together the skirt pieces. Hi, Dora. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this little facing right here. So this bit where the snaps are, this is just a little facing piece that's sewn in and flipped to the other side and then top stitched. In fact, it's possible that it actually may just be top stitched from both sides, I think, because like this isn't really on the edge. So yeah, maybe I can just fold it and kind of top stitch around both sides. And then this is that where it like goes in like that. I never really do these, so it's just going to be interesting to try. But anyway, that's going to be my next thing, putting that band on. Once that band is on, I think I can go ahead and just kind of do my fold, like my tuck here, my fold here, and then my tuck on the other side and my tuck right here, just kind of math all of that out and running the gathering stitches around the rest of the waist. That is my goal for tonight. So I'm doing a lot of scaling to find things like the distance between the false front and the actual opening, or like how long the false front press should be. And so I'm using my same equations that I had before, this one for the length and this one for the width. I'm using those to find the scale for the distances for everything. So this wound up being about 9 inches from the actual opening crease to the false front crease, and that is going to get gathered down to like about 5.5 inches. And then this is like 14, almost 15 inches long. Not all of that's going to have buttons, but the crease goes to all that. I think the buttons go to about here. I haven't actually done that math yet, so I do still have to do that math, but that will come later. Right now it's just pinned in place. I am going to wait and do the math for the other pleat, like the actual pleat that's on the other side opposite of this. I'm going to wait to do that after I've done the gathering stitches. That's my next step, is doing all the gathering stitches. And it looks like that's what they did too. They did all of the gathering stitches, and then the pleat that is on the other side, they just smoothed out the gathering stitches. So that's my plan there as well. And I'm torn whether I should run the gathering stitches directly over this, which would help to keep it in place, and then I can just smooth that out and make sure it's flat, or whether I should do 2 separate gathering stitches. I'm honestly tempted to just do the same one. So anyway, it'll be 2 gathering stitches quite close together, about probably 1/4 inch apart, and I will pull that up to fit my waist. So this is where we are at right now. I know it doesn't look like much. I do kind of wonder if it's maybe a little too full, too gathered in the front, and I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe I want to shift that to the back a little bit more, but that would mean shifting where the flap and where the opening are a little bit more to the back. So this is the false front opening right here, so there will be buttons down here, and then this is the actual opening, and this is the flap on the other side, matching flap, and then the back is gathered as well. So that's what it looks like currently. Obviously I don't have the scallopy trim on there. That's gonna take a while because I have to do all those scallops on the machine and figure out how I'm doing all that. But first I have to obviously cut them, and I have to figure out the width that I want them, since, as I mentioned before, I'm not really sure if I want to do the scale, which would be like 5.8 inches or something like that. It's kind of a lot. So that's where we are now. I might do a little experimenting tonight. Otherwise, that will be it. So I've been playing around with doing the scallops this evening because I didn't feel like stopping sewing yet, but I didn't want to do the bodice. And something has come to my attention. If you remember, I was talking when I examined this dress about the fact that the inside has serging. And it was like, wow, interesting. That's, you know, unusual for something that old. But you know what? All of the scalloped trims on here, all of this scallop satin stitching, this is also done with the serger. I know, right? Because the thing is, and I don't even know if I can get the camera this close and have it focus, but the thing is, do you see this row of stitching right here on the inner edge of this scallop? This row of stitching in combination with a satin stitch here and the zigzaggy bit in the back here, that can only be done with 3 threads at one time. Therefore, it has to be done on a serger. And I actually determined through experimentation what stitch would most approach this, but I cannot figure out how to get my scallops so defined. Mine look ugly. I'll show you them. So first I'm going to start off with my first scallop test, which was trying to do it on machine. And you can see that these all look pretty nice and defined. I started with ones that were way too small, went to another one that was like, you know, kind of working here. This was the slightly more dense version. And then I tried some other ones here as well, but I liked the density, but they just look really weird, like the joins in them. They just look really weird. And then I went and I just did a zigzag on the machine, which is this. This was a 0.3 width or 0.3 stitch length zigzag, and I cut that. I did this freehand, so ignore the fact that they're probably not even. But none of them have that inner stitch because, again, you can't do that when you only have 2 threads. You only get this and you get this on the back. That's all you get. To get that look like this, here we have this inner thread, and it looks quite the same on front and back that the original did. But you'll notice that mine, which granted again are freehand, are just really, really wonky looking. I did these second. I think these were slightly narrower, and then I did these first, which were slightly wider. But I cannot figure out how they get such nice tiny turns in all of that. But this is the stitch they use. This is a flat lock stitch. So it's a 3-thread flat lock with a rolled hem length. Like I think I'm on a 0.5 stitch length, and that's it. And this is the stitch that they used. It's exactly it. I just don't know how to make it clean. Ugh, it kills me, because if I could use the same stitch, that'd be great. I mean, granted, this also takes so much longer than any of these. I mean, like, of all of these, this one probably takes the longest just because I'm doing it by hand, though these kind of, the machine kind of runs a little bit slowly. But, oh, you guys, all of these are too small, way too small, at least for the ones on the skirt. The ones on the bodice, they'd probably work. On the collar, on the cuffs, they'd work fine. But these freehand ones are the only ones that could be wide enough for the skirt, because the skirt ones are this wide. There's nothing on my machine that goes that wide. So I basically have to do those freehanded either on the serger or the sewing machine. And I want to do it on the serger, but I can't make them clean. And part of it, so this is my serger. This is a very old Baby Lock Imagine. Might have even been before it was called the Imagine, which is maybe why it has an E on it. I don't know, but it's very old. I got it secondhand, but it's still like the best serger ever because Baby Lock has the best sergers. And so what I've done here, you can see my setup. I have this on a 4.0 stitch width and a 0.5, like this shouldn't even exist, stitch length. It's literally in between where it wants to sit, but it's the only thing that worked. And I locked my blade so that I could even get in there. But locking the blade on a Baby Lock, it still sits really up high here. So what I feel like I need is a flat plane where I can just get in there. But I tried unscrewing the blade and it won't turn at all. So I don't know, maybe I'll try it a little more. It's still a challenge, like even just to navigate it at all, but I just feel like this is the way to go. So I'm working on drafting out the bodice patterns based on the Butterick 1693 bodice pattern and trying to get it to look like that bodice right there. So The main thing that I'm doing is I'm like super lengthening the front of the bodice. This is actually going to extend 4.25 inches because that's where it will get to my natural waist. This over here is 3.75 inches, same with here on the back, but this center back is only 1 inch, and honestly, I'm not even sure I'm gonna need that much because this, like, I had added 1.25 inches to the 1912 version of this, but only to here. And then the back was even because this has a pretty big slope all on its own. So that's what I'm doing lengthwise. But the other thing that I noticed was that the shoulder on here is crazy, crazy wide. You can see how much it is falling off the shoulder even of the dress form. And I don't know, I guess maybe I haven't studied the mid to later 19-teens enough, but maybe wide shoulders were actually a thing. This is 5 3/4 inches wide plus the seam allowance. So very, very wide. And if you notice what I had here originally from the 19-teens version, this was actually only 5.5 inches wide, I think is what that was, because basically I'm going to wind up adding 1.25 inches this way. The other thing that you might have noticed on here is that the shoulder seam is not at the shoulder seam, it's behind the shoulder seam, particularly up here by the neck. The shoulder seam would be like right here if it was right down the center, but we're talking all the way back here. So I have adapted this pattern, or I am adapting this pattern to take that into consideration. So I have folded out part of the top here for the back, so it's going to look more like that. That actually does widen that a bit too, but it's still not wide enough. I'm going to add 0.25 inches out here, which I had originally taken away from this pattern. You can see where the cut lines were supposed to be. It was out here. And then up here, I am adding up 1.25 inches here and 2 inches here at the neck. So hopefully that's all enough. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut out a mock-up. The thing that I'm really and truly completely redrawing is the arm's eye on the front pieces. So this is the piece that will be the left-hand side of the bodice where it cuts at the center front. The other one is going to continue across, and I'm going to use this piece to cut that one, plus kind of following where this line goes, because obviously this is very different than that pattern. So I'm definitely worried about how this is going to actually play out because this is humongous. Like the bust measurement, I think is at least a good 5 inches larger than my bust. The waist gets gathered, so that's fine, but the bust is huge. So I have a feeling this isn't quite gonna work, but I'm gonna sew it up and we shall see. So it's not quite right, but I'm trying to figure out exactly how it's not quite right. So the first thing that I did, it was definitely way too long in the shoulders. It was making it really be super long and baggy in the back, and it was being a little baggy in the front as well. So I have right now just pinched out some excess right here, probably at least an inch or inch and a half of excess in total, and I will figure out how that needs to actually come out soon. But also, like, the shape of my neckline was actually wrong before, so hopefully this gives me something to play with. The other thing that I messed up on was that I somehow made the front way longer on the side than the back. Really not sure how that happened, but you can see it's pretty significant. So obviously that will need to get tapered and cut off on both sides. And then, like, there's something about the cross that's not quite right. I've kind of folded it out here, and some of this would, I mean, all of this has some seam allowance. So there's a 1/2 inch seam allowance on all of this, but you can see it gets a lot wider down here. So I think there's some excess that needs to go away there. I was also at first thinking it was too long, but now that I've done the tuck out of the shoulder, maybe it's not too long. Maybe that part is okay. The other thing is that I think it is just a little bit too big overall. So I think what I'm going to do is just take a little bit out of the side seams all the way from top to bottom. Because, like, right now I have a lot of gathering going on, particularly in the back, but also right here. And I feel like it's just a little too much. So I think if I take out somewhere between like a 1/2 inch to an inch total on each side, then that will probably fit better. So the biggest thing though is the shoulders. I mean, as soon as I pinched that out, I could just feel the whole thing sitting way better. The other thing is that honestly, I didn't make the shoulders wide enough. Not compared to how wide and off the shoulders that seam was sitting on the extant one. Like, this is, I mean, this is pretty much exactly where I would want a shoulder seam to sit. and the other one it's like super dropped, so I'm a little torn. I'm thinking maybe I need to extend that a little just because it seems so off the shoulders. And I don't know if this is just like it's only on this piece, they made it wrong, they made their shoulders too wide, or this is how things were in the 1915-16 era. So I should probably do a little research to see if I can find where that shoulder seam sits. But yeah, if it is common, I will probably have to go ahead and increase that all the way around the top of the armscye for the shoulder and make them a little bit wider. So I have some work to do before I can do mock-up number 2, because obviously this does require a second mock-up or at least tweaks to this mock-up, and I will figure that out. So funny story, I decided I would make one small change that I did not think of before and see what that would do, and apparently that fixed pretty much everything. So all I did was I created a little seam down the center back right here. It, I think, starts at about 1 inch total taken out at the top, like at the neck, and I think it went down to about like 1 1/4, 1.5 inches taken out total at the bottom. And I don't think that's enough at the bottom because I'm still getting it very balloony back here. And honestly, it's probably a modern sensitivity that I don't want it that balloony, but I don't feel like hers really does that. Granted, it's on a dress form and not a person, and like the dress form's waist is too long for the dress, so it's not fitting the dress form correctly, but I'm not getting a balloony look from there at all, and I am from this. So I think I'm gonna take out a little bit more in the center back. You can kind of see that I just have like a fin going on right here. And I think I'm going to taper it out a little bit more to hopefully eliminate some of that ballooniness. But otherwise, almost everything else actually now fits perfectly. I literally haven't even done anything with taking up the shoulders that like caused the shoulder to fix itself. So one thing that I will need to figure out is how to make it so that I have a nice curve right here, since right now it's very square and I need a curve in order to be able to attach the collar. So I do have to figure that out for when I'm doing the actual, but I think I can do that on the actual fabric. I also probably should widen the shoulders at least 1/2 inch just from up here. So again, I think I can do that on the actual fabric. And then this is going to get tapered. So I really like the fold right here. So I'm going to create, basically that is going to be the fold line, and I'm going to make sure that it has the seam allowance on top of that, but the rest of it's going away. It's also too long on this lapped over section right here. So I'm going to cut off some of that excess length, make it so that these sides here match up with the backs, and that's it. So yeah, we're pretty darn close. I'm going to do some of these changes right now before I try to take out the extra little fin bit, and then that should be it. If that works, then I'm going to do everything else on the final. And since I'm drafting this myself, really, I mean, it kind of started as the buttock pattern, but as you can see, I really left that way behind in the dust. And so I think I should be able to put out a pattern for this, and I will make the changes that I'm going to make to my actual. I'll make that on the pattern as well. So I'm just gonna kind of hold it closed for now, but I just took in the fin even more, so I don't even know what it's up to at this point, but I think I've taken at least 2.5 inches out of the lower part of the center back. So it's almost kind of like a sway back adjustment, I guess. And it is so much better. Like, I'm still getting little bits of gathering, which is what I want, but I'm not getting like super gathered puffy. So I think this is the winner. And because I did that as a straight line all the way down the back, it's just a diagonal straight line, but I should still be able to actually cut that piece on the fold, which is what it's supposed to be. It's just going to mean that it will kind of swing upwards, I think, the pattern. Yeah, as in the shape of the bottom should wind up swinging upwards a little bit because of taking out that bit in the center. So I think I'm good to go. Oh, I almost forgot to add, there's one other thing that I did, which was I actually curved out this neckline just a little bit, and I need to do a little more. You can see the line I've drawn here, and that is helping me to get the curved shape on here without actually changing the pattern shapes or anything. I'm getting the curve. It's also alleviating, I think, a little bit of a wrinkle that's happening right here. So clearly it was going too far up anyway. So cutting out that excess is going to really work. I am, however, going to add the 0.5 inches here. So it's going to start by tapering here and end by tapering at like the plus sign back there. And it will taper out 1/2 inch on the arm size there. But I think that is everything left to change. So the back piece was pretty straightforward to cut out because I just folded the fabric over, made sure that the grid matched on both sides, and then laid the pattern on top and cut it. But this one is proving annoying, mostly because I've lined up all of the grid lines on the outside of the bodice front piece. This is the bodice one that ends with the center front. And so I've lined that all up, but as you can maybe see on here, there's a lot of wrinkling going on. So I'm kind of at this point just going to assume that the other one will stretch into this position where these wrinkles are, and that at least the outside of the grid is equal. But of course I can't really say what's going to happen for this part right here. So basically I'm going to lay this pattern now on top of this and just draw in that extra line and cut that out and hope that it works. So the bodice is all assembled, as you can see right here, and I've run the gathering stitches down at the bottom around the waist, and now I'm trying to draft out the collar. I feel like I probably did this completely wrong, and I should have done at least like this method that I did. I should have done it before I put this all together. I should have done it when it was just the shoulder seams, because what I did was I laid this out flat so that I could get the shape of the whole neckline, including the cross bit. I laid it out flat on some fabric that I thought would be big enough, and then it turns out it wasn't, and traced the whole neckline, and then did the scaling thing to determine how long it would be, like in the back and right here, and I think I kind of did like the shoulder, how long that would be in each bit, and then I kind of connected it, and over here I ran off the fabric that I had, so it should have been here, and then it tapers out to like 1/2 inch down here. So I think this is going to be totally wrong, honestly, because I mean, what even is this shape? Like, really, it's ridiculous. But I'm going to try it anyway. Please excuse my incredibly shiny and gross face. It is very hot and it's also 1:30 in the morning. Anyway, so I went ahead and I pinned the collar on, and I think it's actually not quite as off as I thought it was. It is definitely too wide because it's going off the shoulders. And because of that, it's kind of bunching a little here because there's not enough like width around circumference, I don't know, to make it over my shoulders, but it shouldn't be that wide. On the antique one, it goes to about 3/4 of an inch or so from the edge of the shoulder. So I'm thinking that if I cut that in, it's not going to pull. And honestly, I think that it needs to get decreased all the way around, because I did that thing that, like, you know, clothing companies do when they scale up for plus sizes, where I just like scale up. And I scaled it based on my height because that was what I was doing for the back drape, which, like, the back drape, I actually don't hate. It might be a little bit long, but I don't think it's that far off where it's draping in the back. But then I did that same scale for like the width of my shoulders, which I have narrow shoulders. So like my shoulders, I think, are narrower than a lot of people who are smaller than me. So why did I scale it up? Because I'm crazy and it's 1:30 in the morning. So yeah, that's why it's way too wide here. And honestly, I think it's the same down here. It's too wide. Also, it's not actually making it, well, now it is. It wasn't making it to the center. Yeah, it's kind of doing that thing. So I feel like that needs to be just increased there to like make it there so it doesn't pull. But overall, it's honestly not that far off, not nearly as much as I expected. So I think doing some of the trimming will probably be sufficient. This time I'm not even showing my face because it's too gross, but I finished the collar shape. So obviously it does have the weird little notch cut out of it. I'm going to have to smooth that over, but, and then the other thing is that I'm going to have to extend this side because it just didn't quite make it to the center here, but everything else should be good. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this out of the actual fabric. The thing with the actual fabric is that you have to cut it. Probably I'm going to do 1/2 inch past where this is because the scallops can't be actually on the edge until I cut them away. So I'm going to cut this out, but 1/2 inch larger. So the collar is all cut out in the actual fabric now, and you can see this pink line going around the edge. That's where the actual edge is going to be, where the lowest part of the scallops are going to be, and then the rest of this is going to get cut off. But I need room for the scallops. You can't just like scallop right on the edge, so that will give me that room, and then I cut off the excess of the scallops. And I do all of this by placing tearaway interfacing or tearaway stabilizer, like embroidery stabilizer, right under it, and I can pull that away and shift it as I go, so I don't need a really big piece of stabilizer. I just need like little strips at a time, basically. I did do a couple of tests last night to determine which would be like the best size scallop for both the collar and also for the cuffs of the sleeves once I get to there. And as you can see, I did quite a lot of those tests out, and I kind of marked which stitch was which and what settings were within those stitches as I went. And I kind of determined that the best one for me, I think, is going to be my stitch that is 826 on the small size on the dense stitching, things that you can kind of change around on my machine. The nice thing is my machine does have a lot of scallop stitches, and I had a lot of options to choose from. I felt like none of them were quite right, but that one was super, super close. So I will be doing that soon. However, in doing all of my testing, I realized I was almost out of the off-white thread. So I'm gonna have to go get more thread before I can actually do this collar. I should be able to get that either later today or tomorrow, but that will go into the next vlog because it's Sunday morning, and if you can't tell by my outfit, today is actually the 4th of July. So I'm going to go off and enjoy myself and end the video here, and this is what we have gotten so far. So we do have the skirt that is pretty much done except for the hem and the flounces, so that is great. We have the bodice all cut out. It needs to be finished, have closures, etc., have the collars, and have the sleeves. So next week we will be starting with probably the scallops on the collar, because then I can go ahead and just attach the collar. I obviously want to do the scallops before I attach it, and also the sleeves and sleeve mock-ups and all of that other sort of stuff. I'm hoping maybe I can finish this next week. We'll see. It might take 2 weeks, but this is still, I think, going to be a fairly quick project for a historical project. So yay! So anyway, I do hope that you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube twice a week, with my sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and other costuming content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi account down in the description below. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Heidi and Sharon. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!